Welcome back to Dialogue 340. We're still at the Gubernatorial Trail. We have Lieutenant Governor Roach with us. Thank you for joining us once again. And I got to let the trickle guy trickle. Go ahead, trickle.
So the first thing I want to ask, in your current role as Lieutenant Governor, you're also the de facto Commissioner of Banking and Insurance. In your time as Lieutenant Governor, what's some of the issues that you've seen, and how would you change? And now you're running for the higher office. What can we do to remedy those issues?
Okay. Well, one of the things that really keep me up at night is the fact that we don't have an individual health policy. And part of the reality of that, part of how that has happened, really has its roots in the Affordable Care Act. That the monies that we received weren't sufficient for us to have an exchange, and linking up with another territory or state was not a feasible thing. So the money was used to expand Medicaid so that we reach more people that were above the income guidelines that Medicaid operated under. But as a result of that, the market for an individual health product, it will be small, and there's no mandate. We even went as far as to travel to Trinidad and Tobago to speak to the company that provides an individual healthcare product in the British Virgin Islands. We figured we're a larger population. If they can provide it there, they can provide it here. It turns out that the BVI subsidizes the premiums for their population. And so we would have to make a decision as a society if that is something we wish to do, number one. But number two, we ended up recruiting a company that actually came, and it took us about 2 years to review all of their financials to make sure that it was a good decision for the territory. But what happened when they came in is that in the very first year, they asked us for an increase in the premium. When they came in, it sounded decent. Next year, we had a request for an increase. The following year, we had a request for an increase. Now, in each instance, we looked at medical inflation, the cost of medical services, and how that has increased. And we gave them a compromise. The last time they came back and it was like they wanted a 7.5% increase on the premium, we said we couldn't do that. And so they decided that they wanted to withdraw from the market. Now, we're having some additional conversations as if maybe that can change, but that's a big thing for us in the territory. And if we're successful in bringing it back, we told them that they have a lot of work to do to grow the market. At first, the premium was comparable to what the government pays, for its employees, but it kept getting higher. And so that troubles me. I would like to see more our people having the option of having that individual health product, but that's the root of it. Because we know that before the Affordable Care Act, we had places like Blue Cross Blue Shield, we had other companies operating here, and they left. Aside from that, we live in what I don't like to say it, but a kind of hurricane alley, and we're affected every year by these storms. So windstorm insurance and the availability of it is an important challenge in the territory. We're not like, fortunately, in places like Florida, companies have pulled out. One of the major changes that we had in our market here was Lloyd's of London changing its service from an admitted carrier to what we call surplus lines. And in surplus, you can go to surplus lines only if you can show that you've been rejected by an admitted carrier. So we need more windstorm in the territory, trying to get people to understand that we are not alone. The climate change in the world and how it has affected, whether it's fires in the Midwest or in the West, or floods, the fires in places like Hawaii. All of these, if you look at, say, the last hurricanes, look how many islands in the Caribbean were hit. Those are some of the same carriers. So that will continue to be a challenge. We continue to work on it. The paradigm is that when they come to us for increases, we have to review that, and we have to decide whether or not they can. Sometimes it's not an increase. Sometimes you've made your first claim, and so the benefit that you got of never having had a claim goes away. challenges like in reinsurers, because you know the insurance companies have insurance, and the reinsurers, they make certain demands as well. And so one of the challenges we've been having is they're not wanting to insure wooden houses. And we make the case that lots of wooden houses in the Caribbean have been standing for 100 years or more, and they've seen a lot of storms. But sometimes those challenges don't come from the companies, but from the reinsurers. I think we should do some more exploration of a self-funded policy, but there are lots of questions to me that need to be addressed before we make that move.
Yeah, you talk about challenges. You came across a challenge in 2018, and you took a little heat about it. Now we're talking about Lime Tree reopening and your vote in 2018, and you were, again, in a minority, right? How does that look like for you today when there's rumblings of the oil refinery reopening and some of the things that you were concerned about in 2018?
Well, I still remain concerned. When you Caribbean, small islands and small states have to make big decisions about how they alter their varied geography to meet industry. You know, one year the ship companies are telling you they need more deep water, or they need more dredging, they need more piers, right?
Dredging of St. Thomas Harbor.
Right. So one year they're telling you that, and then sometimes you go to the sea trade conferences and they're telling you they're going to be making smaller ships that want less traveled destinations. St. Croix are less.
Is that what happened when you went to sea trade this year?
Yeah,
Wow.
I didn't go this year.
Okay.
I went. I've never gone as a lieutenant governor.
Okay.
I went twice as a senator.
Okay.
And that's what we were talking about Gallows Bay as a port for some of these smaller ships that want to go to less traveled destinations, right? And I say that about the infrastructure because it brings you to St. Croix.
Yeah.
The entire south shore of St. Croix was altered for the Heswell refinery, long before you all were even like a figment of your parents' imagination.
Lost that edge.
Right? 1,800 acres. And you changed, and here you have this hulk of metal, you know, sitting there. And the question is, if it's not a refinery, then what does it become, right? And when we were in the legislature facing the question of what should happen next after it closed in 2012, you had, on one hand, the EPA telling you that there was $700 million worth of environmental damage sitting beneath this refinery and underground.
But what do you mean when you say 700 million? What does that mean?
To clean it up.
Okay, so what is it? What is it? You said to clean it up.
The site,
Okay.
if we were to...
Are you speaking about aquifers or just the site itself?
For the site
Yeah,
itself and all of that. So when you talk about it reopening, the possibilities of reopening, one of the things that is important to me is the environment. The
Yeah.
same thing I said to you about the stewardship
Yeah.
of the land.
Yes.
I think a lot about the environment. And the economy, you know, that's the challenge of a politician.
Yeah.
It's like balancing these
Yeah.
things.
You're not anti-industry. You're just trying to balance.
Not in the least. Not,
Yeah.
We need industry.
Right.
We are a marketplace.
But sometimes whenever you ask someone or you try to relate information about balance, like people just push you to the left really quickly and think that you're anti-industry.
Absolutely.
So I'm just trying to make it straight.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you could correct me if I'm wrong, but you would notice that from the closure of the refinery, you don't have people making all of these complaints about environmental factors. That's not to say that you can't operate it in a way that protects the environment, but you will remember the fumes. You will remember people talking about their roofs, the quality of their cistern water. I had a cousin who lived on the refinery in one of those houses, and it's the one that when you come in, I think it's not Fig Tree.
Hope. Yeah.
Right. And one day I was home alone. They were all gone, and I was home alone. And this alarm went off. And so I was like, they didn't tell me what to do when the alarm went off. And so when they came back, I said, well, what are you all to do if something happens at the refinery? I never thought about it before. I just say lying in the bedroom chilling. And they said, well, they've told us to go as far west as possible. That's what they told me.
Okay.
So I was like, does everybody know? Does everybody know this? Like, does everybody on St. Croix know this information? So in the interest of industry, in the interest of people of St. Croix having access to well-paying jobs and securing their future in terms of the possibilities of home ownership and building wealth, I want to explore every option that makes that happen. But I want to do it safely. And
appreciate that.
Of the people.
And speaking about that option, for some, Hess is the panacea that the Virgin Islands economy needs. Outside of that, are there other plans that you see in your possible administration to diversifying, especially within St. Croix, our economy here?
Well, one of the major challenges I think that we're really going to have to face is a human capital issue. And when I came up with the free tuition at UVI, it wasn't just for students to go to UVI, because I got to remind people all the time that persons in their adult years can take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Once they don't have a bachelor's degree and they meet the criteria of having completed the number of years of high school that it requires, I think it's either 3 or 4, they can access it as well. And it really is meant as a human capital measure, because one of the requirements of the bill was that the institutions like the university, the Department of Labor, the Economic Development Authority, and so forth, with the Department of Education, would get together and discuss what are the employment needs moving forward, and is our curriculum or are the trade opportunities that are here meeting those needs. And so we're going to have a lot of industry separate from a refinery, that what that may bring. We are constructing schools at prices that we've never seen before, $150 million for a school, right? And so we're going to have more than enough employment. The challenge is, are we preparing the people to do it? So we can't look at just one industry. We have to look at the whole picture. I felt so good this year when we went to the Korean technical graduation, and they filled that auditorium. I mean, it was hundreds of them who had taken on a second career, second trade. So I think that we're going to be a construction economy for a while, because part of what I want to see is all these projects that we've broken ground on, the number of head starts that are nearing completion, certainly the schools, certainly the health facilities. I say to people all the time, you have a choice. There is an ocean of opportunity. You can decide whether you're going to sink or whether you're going to swim in it. And those options are there for people. So people are coming in, but we have to make the best choices for all people who are here in terms of upskilling them and giving them access to training opportunities to be able to access some of these opportunities.
So what I'm hearing from you before I let you jump in, Daren, is that we're already on the wave of construction. Let's maximize that wave. You move as many dollars as we can from that, keep it here as much as possible, and ensuring that our workforce aligns with that wave of construction. That's what carries us forward.
All right, so we missed to ask. Yeah, talk about past on building, right? There are individuals in the individuals, families that perceive us they're hurting, right? And what I mean by hurting is just and economically, the cost of living. When we talk about WAPA, when we talk about what they have to pay groceries, what are some ideas that you have if you're in a driver's seat to impact those areas that will allow us to breathe a little bit easier and feel better about themselves?
Well, I think we're going to see, as we're seeing now, more inflation. If you are trying to construct a home, what people are quoting you know that you have to pay. And certainly what people are paying at the grocery stores and department stores, etc. I think part of it begins with looking at a living wage for people. And we talked about that with the university, because they had done a study about what it requires to live in the territory. So
45, yeah, 2000.
And that was then. I still think you got to look at it now because inflation has already surpassed that. So I think we have to look at that. How do we move everybody to a place of earning that you can support your families? And that requires us to think about our economy differently, and it also requires us to think about whether it's jobs that our people need, whether you settle into some job or through some of the things at the university that we uncover and support that entrepreneurial spirit that we have as African people. To every African country that you go, marketplaces of people thriving because their ingenuity and their entrepreneurial spirit is encouraged. So I think we have to do that. I think we have unexplored potential in our university. I still think it's, in some instances, and I may get a little flack for this, but I think in some instances it's still kind of this citadel, on a hill somewhere, and the ideas don't necessarily trickle down to the population. I think one of the issues that I wanted to mention with regard to, say, our improving infrastructure, a huge component of it is health. And I've supported from the very beginning the university saying it wants to establish a medical school. Because studies show that where people are educated, there's a great chance that they will stay. So the idea behind a medical school is not only to provide medical education, because what happens is the tangential kinds of businesses, they grow. You have, whether you're making gloves, whether you're making undergarments, whether you just have creativity in servicing the needs of your population through having this outlet, an outlet for training. The Simulation Center in St. Croix was thought of as a piece in medical tourism, that somebody who has a medical practice in Ohio could decide that they're going to shut down for a week and bring everybody in their office to train at the Simulation Center in St. Croix. So I think that is to play a great piece in the medical care, not only for us to grow the medical professionals, but to grow industry around it as well. So we're going to have, I think there are lots of exciting things that can happen from so many of the things that are in the pipeline, because the medical school, when I was in the legislature, was a figment. We were discussing it. Today we have all the facilities to do it, and all we need is to pursue the accreditation and then to begin to recruit students to medical education.
Yeah, so let me backtrack. We can not have this conversation if we don't talk about WAPA.
Yes.
We all know that WAPA is a big challenge. We can even go back to the early inception and you could look at daily news articles, and the same issues that existed then are the same as the issue that exists now. If you were in the driver's seat, how would you fundamentally work on WAPA? Because we have all these rolling blackouts. The cost of it, even though we subsidize some of it, we're still amongst not just this part of the world, but the entire world. We have one of the highest kilowatt charges. What would you do if you're in a driving seat to improve that?
Well, people talk about fixing WAPA, and we don't all agree on what it means. So first when we talk about fixing, we should have an agreement on a definition, right? So if I were to fix WAPA, and I'm saying that I were to fix WAPA, but if I were to fix WAPA, to me there would be two fundamental things: reliability of service and affordability of service. Those two things, to me, are the major concepts. Now, I say to people all the time, living in Connecticut, the longest time I've lived outside the territory in one place was 4 years in Connecticut. And in those 4 years, we had one power outage. And I think it was scheduled. And I had to fight myself to stop thinking about that in the context of WAPA in the Virgin Islands, right? Because they're on this North American grid, always produced in Canada,
Connected to other,
West, Middle, and all over. You don't even know when they have an interruption in power because they feed in from another place to do it. The only way we can accomplish that is a diversification of the sources going into our grid. because we're all standalones. Islands sitting in St. Croix, in the case of St. Croix, solely in the Caribbean Sea, St. Thomas and St. John, Caribbean and Atlantic Ocean, right? We don't even have a cable between us, except for St. John that's tethered to St. Thomas, unfortunately, right?
Which have been proven to be vulnerable.
Yes, unfortunately.
Right. So we can share power. If St. Croix St. Croix now has so much more solar going into the grid, you can't even say, okay, we have this much in the battery, we're going to send some to St. Thomas, or vice versa. So for me, the fix includes diversification of sources into our only grid that is an independent and solitary grid. So the movement to solar, the battery backup of solar, and this is a thing where you have a past that you don't grow from. We tell every people, we celebrate our mills that are part of this landscape when sugar was king, right? But those windmills, what did they run on?
So wind power.
Already we have in our landscape the proof that once upon a time, wind. So I believe wind is also a part of the solution. But what I try to think about with WAPA is that several things have happened that are good. Trust me, I have 6 WAPA bills. Some people think we sit in I don't have a government house that has a thing that just flicks on and no bill. I have 6 bills. My mom, water and power. I have a property in Hospital Ground, water and power. And where I live, 2 structures, right? So I pay 6 bills for WAPA. So I'm very familiar with it. My mom she has asthma, so her medicine, Dupixent, has to be cold. She uses a nebulizer when sometimes she has to do that. So I know about this needing to put medicines in the fridge and
You have a large diabetic population as well.
right? So so but I am. If you want an eternal optimist, I'm one. I'm telling you off the bat. I'm never moping, saying, "Oh my God, this is." I'm an eternal optimist. So I said, okay. They replaced the wooden poles. They've done a huge job of the composite poles, which should mean a better recovery in storms and after storms. I've been at their undergrounding ceremonies where they have done the towns in both St. Croix and St. Thomas. So again, the restoration of power when more quickly after a storm. We've paid the debt of that vital project that expanded from 80 million to 160 million or whatever the case may be, so that in the St. Thomas, St. John district, we can now talk about the propane conversion that has already happened, on this island. So I think there's some positives that have already taken place. So I think we're on the way. And some people talk about state of emergency and federal intervention, right?
Yeah.
Emergency crisis. Yeah.
Can you explain that for the viewers?
My problem is this. I'll tell you what my problem is. When you've been in government, and I've been in government from 1995,
All right.
right? So that's 31 years, something like that, right? And then going on 32. You see what federal intervention means.
Privatization and takeover? Right.
When
Less
we
autonomy.
had a third-party fiduciary for the Department of Education, millions spent to that private company for things that we are capable of doing. When you look at the consent decree, don't tell me any police force in the Virgin Islands is walking killing black men on instinct, that we have to have decades in a consent decree about use of force. All of that represents the federal government. Look at Puerto Rico, that has that PROMESA board, that has every financial decision that they make having to be made outside of their territory, literally. So when you call upon a federal government that already has its own issues, and in a time like this, sometimes your problem becomes you can't get rid of that when the problem has been corrected. So I believe that Virgin Islands, and I'm informed in my decision and thinking about it because I've had the opportunity to look at what Virgin Islanders have done over time to assert a right to more self-government in their territory. And every time I think about somebody saying, let's get the federal government to do this or to fix it, I think about how people have fought to govern themselves. And before I throw that away, I just want to make sure that we've explored all the options that we can to do it. So I would introduce wind. Would want wind to be a part of the mix, number one. And number two, whenever I fly over St. Croix and I look at, I use an example in the West, sunshine. And I look at that expanse of roof. I'm always looking at it and I'm saying, what if we created a grid of all of this roof space that's available? If we took all of it and converted it to solar, every school, every government building, because we say St. Croix is a big island, but it's still small. And how much land can we allocate to just solar fields?
Right. Agriculture people are going to get vexed.
How do we balance that, right? Yeah. Right? So if we could like ramp up the solar, we have this incredible experience of having sun every day. 365 days a year we have sun, right? So that's what I think, because I had this conversation with someone the other day and they were like, well, people are not complaining about the cost. I said, people are not complaining about the cost because they're praying that when they go home, the current is on. So they haven't even reached the place of saying, oh my God, I'm paying the highest bill, you know.
You just want it on.
Right. So if we diversify, put in all of that in terms of the feeding into this grid, then affordability becomes the issue, because it isn't just my mother and your aunt and your uncle. It's your ability to have a little business. You know, I have friends who went out of business because of WAPA. I know that. A little sandwich shop at the height of WAPA was telling me they're paying $7,000 a month. How many sandwiches do you make for that, right? How many sandwiches do you need to be able to pay that bill? So the affordability is still the thing. You notice we're caught up in the reliability and the distribution now, but the cost is something that people can't even focus on because they want to go home and find power. So my fix has to be fixing the grid, putting all the sources into it, checking this transmission and where there are leaks and losses, and then making sure that we have a product that both residents and industry can afford. And again, we come back to this idea. When you're in this long enough, and when you think about and do research about what's happening, we're not the only one. The lieutenant governors took us to...
I just come from Jamaica, and it was a blackout for the whole island, yeah.
And I had one in Houston.
There you go. So it's national and international.
So they took us to a mission to Germany. Several of the lieutenant governors, they paid for it. I have to say that.
Yes.
And one of the things they were talking about, subsidizing businesses because of rising energy costs. And I asked them the question, I was like, you're going to subsidize business? You're going to subsidize your people? And they were like, well, we've been talking about that. And I was like, well, you can't talk about one without the other. So maybe as we get to affordability, maybe there are things we need to talk about in bringing relief to our population with regard to paying for this energy.
So you mentioned self-government, or you're discussing leadership. One of the things we've seen lately is that public trust and public confidence has taken a blow. Looking back at the 8 years, there's been a very rocky road. And as I said, one of my unfortunately famous quotes is, this is how all commissioners make your side hustle. If you are elected, how can you start to restore public trust, one, in government, and then two, what safeguards can you put in place to make sure we're not dealing with more corruption and or leakage? Because just like we're losing in water and power, we're losing money.
Well, I think a big part of it is who you select for these positions of trust, and how you scrutinize them, and your willingness to make change when change is necessary. When you come to a place, when you migrate to a place, it carries a tremendous responsibility, because people want to tell you, go back where you come from. You don't want to give them a reason to have to say that to you. So to me, I have a responsibility to St. Thomas and St. John and to St. Croix as a person who has chosen this place as my home and a place that has welcomed me as a citizen to this place. I have a responsibility to people for that. And I think that responsibility transcends elections. I tell people the most important thing in the world is not to get elected or to get re-elected. The most important thing is to be able to recognize yourself and have people be able to recognize you who went into that role and whether the transformation has been one of positive or negative. So having people in the positions is one. How you screen them, how you select them, and your willingness to change them when they don't function and not think about whether their families who helped to get you elected going to turn against you when you get rid of them before the term ends, etc. You have to be willing to make those kinds of difficult choices. So I think screening the people, putting a lot of thought in who you select is one. The other one is, you know how sometimes you have a thought and then somebody comes along and they give you that, they say the same thing and you're like, it reinforces what you think. And that's the need for professional training and ethics training and conflicts of interest training. People need to hear the lessons repeated. They need to hear the messages repeated, right? So that has to be in place, right? And then you need to beef up. We need to beef up our Office of Inspector General. I would confess that. We need to beef it up so that there are more people dedicated to auditing, checking to see where incongruities occur, and to be able to report on them and to address them. And you want to encourage people to think about their responsibility to this place. You know, the other day we had a call about the bridge that goes by the Canagata. It goes into that neighborhood. I don't know all the names. And it was being undermined. So I went to look at it myself, right? And I called Public Works and I went to look at it myself. And when I got out of the car and looked over the railing and saw bags of garbage that people had just decided to throw over the railing. And, you know, we see that on the roadside. And the argument becomes, who going to pick it up? How come Public Works don't do this? How come this thing is there on the road? What is it that tells a person that they can't treat this place like that? How do we get because it's the same lesson. It's the same thing. The responsibility for stewarding the landscape or the responsibility for maintaining the public trust and being honest and trustworthy in your deeds with regard. It's all the same thing. And it emanates from the person having the responsibility that this place is my home. I have a responsibility to it and I have to take care of it. So growing that attitude, how do we grow that attitude? All of these are pieces of the answer to that thing about the public trust. And I think how you speak to the public, the information that you share with the public, you know, if the street lights are not out and you tell them some nonsense, the next time you try to tell them the truth, they're not going to believe it. So you have to have a consistent approach to speaking honestly and in a way that helps your public say, okay, this is what we're dealing with. I could work with that for now. So I think all of that is in it.
Of course you run out of time.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'll let ladies first. If you have any last comments or questions.
I just wanted to inquire about how you felt about the individuals from the administration being convicted, being that you had a relationship with them, like on a personal note and professionally. How did it affect you?
Well, I would say, of course, that I was disappointed.
Right.
So that comes first, that I was disappointed because I see each cabinet member as important. They're equally important to me. So I was disappointed. I have really only spoken to one of them since the convictions. And what I remember speaking to the cabinet and I said to them, I'm accustomed to speaking to people who are convicted of crime.
Lawyer.
That's my work, right? So I don't think that you're not a human being any longer. You know, you have children. You have children who are disappointed. You have children who now have to deal with their parent being in jail. You have all of them. And so I don't make excuses for anyone,
Right.
but when people serve their time and when the justice system works then I'm also not going to treat them for their whole life as a caster. I think rehabilitation is important. Societies that practice that recognize that people who go wrong are still their people. I'm hoping that they have learned something from the experience and that it won't be repeated. But I still believe in the system. When they were charged, I believed them innocent until they were proven not so. And now you serve your time. And to me, the people must be rehabilitated to come back to believing in good things about the community and wanted to protect it from other wrongdoing. I said to them, we cooperated with the investigation, and that's what we have to do as a government, not to cover up, not to hide, but to let things be investigated openly and to support that.
So one of the questions that I've asked over Gubernatorial is about the cost of stuff, right? We know, because we live outside of the customs zone, there's excise tax. One of the things that we've also learned is that once we talk about gross receipt, when it reaches to the consumer, it could be 20% or higher as an effective tax rate, which will be the highest in the U.S., right? What's your thoughts about how we collect gross receipts? Do we need to convert over to sales tax, which majority of our places within the U.S. use? What will be your ideas on how we can cut down the cost? If we know because of gross receipts, excise tax, that could not only double, triple, quadruple the cost of our U.S. counterparts. What we can do to lower the cost? I know you talked about earlier about raising wages, but I also think we also need to lower costs at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I think that before we talk about new taxes, such as a sale tax, I think we have to make sure that we have maximized our collections with the taxes that are on the books. And I use the gross receipts as a good example, because essentially it's an honor system, and especially when you have businesses that only take cash. Every now and then somebody says, oh, the internet is down or something, and they're only taking cash, right this moment. So we have to make sure that we're maximizing those collections. We have to make sure that we're maximizing the collection of the hotel occupancy tax that villas and Airbnbs have to pay. Are they all paying it, right? And we have to look at some of the uses that we have pledged the taxes to. Part of the new tax that came in when we did the sin tax was an environmental tax. Are we using it to beautify our islands? Are we using it to have any impact on our environment? So that's a question. So honestly, for me, before I could move to say I support or don't support a sales tax, I want to look at our collections and to make sure that it's not just the honest companies that are paying, but that it's being collected across the board. Because I believe that when it is and our coffers are flowing, that we get to offer relief to people on a more substantial basis.
My final question is, when you look at some of the contracts, whether through the PFA, Department of Education, doesn't matter. Oftentimes, these contracts can look like runaway trains. What can you do, if you are elected, to make sure the contracts are a little bit more sober-minded in terms of actual costs to actual profits for some of these companies? Because you hear in excess of millions of dollars. You talked about Vital, and the number just ballooned out of nowhere. What can you do to ensure that when departments or programs are entered into contracts with either local or non-local, that we're getting the fair price?
Yeah. I think we have to look at the bidding process. I know, for instance, that there are times that in my office we put out, we have a contract out we have to reassess every piece of property in the territory. And that's going to require appraisal talent and staff that we don't have. So more than likely, we'll have to put it out to bid. And we put it out to bid more than once. And it's because we weren't satisfied with the responses that came in. So I think sometimes we have to be willing to do that because the statute says the lowest qualified bidder. And so what does qualified mean? We have to apply that. I think sometimes the people who we have negotiating these contracts, we have to look at our procurement processes and maybe share resources across the government so that we are getting a best bang for the buck. And maybe we also don't do enough after the contract has been awarded to do post-review of the contracts and what has been paid out. I think we need to pay more attention, to all of those things. And, the reality is, it's not just that we're protecting government resources, we're protecting the average person, because if construction and other costs rise on government projects, then the contractors who are working on some private project, it inflates everything. And so a lot more is at stake than just the government. And
Thank you so much. Lieutenant, if you'd like to speak to the community about currency, those 2 cameras are right there for you if you'd like to send a message.
No, thank you. I first want to thank you all for having this great conversation. I wish we could do it again, on another occasion.
The primaries might get you again.
Hello, right? But I want to tell the people, I want to say thank you for tuning in and listening to this conversation. You might know, in case you do not know, I'm a part of a gubernatorial team that includes the Senator for St. Croix, from St. Croix, Senator Nobel Francis, who has served as a Senate President on more than one occasion, and who is steeped in public service in the territory. I think between us, we have decades of experience in government, and if you want to think about whether we are making promises that are just out there floating in the universe, you can look to what we have already done in terms of our accomplishments, his management of the police department, mine of the Board of Education, being on the leadership team of the Department of Education. I think between us, at least 60 years of public service, and people who believe that public service must have integrity, and we want to work to restore trust in government. And we made one simple pledge to each other. We are to work to make people's lives better. And I hope you will consider us as a team in this primary election, and that you will go out and cast your vote for team number 1. Roach Francis, 2026.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant. On behalf of Dialogue 340 here at the Fidelity Fin, stay tuned. We'll have more interviews coming.